Legend of Total War here, and today we're doing another Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires campaign review, this time covering Morathi. So Morathi starts her campaign over at the ancient city of Quintex, which is the same start location she's always had, and she goes up against the Sildrator Dark Elves, which is the same enemy that she's had in Warhammer 2. Now, this area here has gone through a little bit of a change in that the Petrified Forest is a new settlement, which means that Morathi is actually able to capture a settlement on turn 1, which previously she wasn't able to do because the high distance between these settlements here and the ancient city of Quintex and her starting army. So this settlement over here has also been moved over to a different province. Now, another thing that's changed for Morathi's start is that she doesn't have to go to war straight away with the High Elves. You see, in Warhammer 2, the Tyrannarch High Elves have already met and are at war with the Sildrator Dark Elves, and they'll send an army over here very early on. If you occupy the settlement, you meet them, you go to war with them. That's just what happens. But in Warhammer 3, they don't know of their existence, so if you don't occupy the settlement, you won't meet the High Elves, they won't declare war on you and drag the entirety of Ulthuan to invade you by turn 5. So if you do occupy it, they're still going to declare war on you. Everybody hates Morathi, that hasn't changed, but at least you have the options to manage this kind of stuff that you didn't have in Warhammer 2. Now, in terms of whether or not this campaign is challenging compared to Warhammer 2, I'd say this, that there are aspects of this campaign that are a lot easier than Warhammer 2. Specifically, wars are a lot easier to manage in Warhammer 3 because the AI is not as smart, they're not as aggressive, and they are easier to defeat on the battlefield by a large margin. They also don't field as many armies. But there are aspects to the campaign mechanics of the Dark Elves that are tricky to manage, and we'll get onto that in a bit. Now, with Morathi, her main faction focus is Slaanesh corruption. Now, I don't think that makes a huge difference, but I'll just go through it briefly. She is able to recruit Demonettes of Slaanesh. They're not dependent on any kind of Slaanesh corruption. You just need to build her public order building, which you're probably going to want to build lots of. And at tier 2, you get access to Demonettes. Tier 4, you get Exalted Demonettes. You don't need them, but it adds flavor. It's entirely up to you. You start off with one. It's entirely up to you if you want to use it. Now, Slaanesh corruption doesn't have any downsides to it. It's just, as you get more Slaanesh corruption, it'll increase your income from slaves. It's not something that you actively need to work towards in order to maintain a province public order. It's just a bit of a bonus. It's hardly something you even need to manage. Because in Warhammer 2, right, she was undivided corruption, which didn't make sense, but there wasn't Slaanesh corruption at that time. And she needed to have that corruption in order to maintain public order, because you'd have huge public order penalties if you didn't have it. Now, in terms of public order, the Dark Elves still suffer from massive problems. Now, Morathi herself is fun to use on the battlefield. I think she's a good legendary lord on the battlefield. She's got some good global bonuses. She's a good legendary lord. The problem is her race. Dark Elves have massive problems, and those problems differ depending on the difficulty that you play on. See, the best races, in my opinion, higher difficulties enhance the experience. The Dark Elves, the higher difficulties make the experience crap, right? Makes it less fun. Doesn't make it necessarily difficult, makes it less fun, right? Because of public order, right? If we have a look at it, if you're playing on normal difficulty, you don't have any global penalties to public order at the start, right? But if you play on legendary difficulty, it's -8. That's pretty significant, but most factions in this game have some way to manage it. You build public order buildings, you garrison armies, use rights. There's ways to manage it, right? But the Dark Elves have fewer ways to deal with it than other races because they don't have many global bonuses to public order, and their public order buildings don't provide much public order at the low levels, and don't even provide that much public order at the high levels. And, unlike other races, they will accumulate more global penalties to public order as the game progresses, because the more slaves you have, the more global penalties to public order you have. And this is one of the reasons why I absolutely despise this slave system. Because in Warhammer 2, right, if you had a province that was well built up, you already built up all the infrastructure, had lots of public order buildings set up, and it was already fairly rich, you'd send your slaves over there. And if you had a province that was like red territory, you could barely manage it as it is, and just wasn't making that much money, you just wouldn't send your slaves there. It made sense, right? But now, you just send your slaves everywhere. And so a province that isn't even consuming any slaves whatsoever will still suffer from the same level of public order penalties as a well-developed province. Now, if you're playing with -8 public order penalties and -6 public order penalties, you absolutely have to build all the the public order buildings, and even then it's a struggle to maintain public order. You definitely can do it. It's not like you have to have revolts. But what this does, it adds extra lame, busy work that you don't want to be doing. This isn't fun stuff. It's not something that you want to be doing in the late campaign, is sitting there babysitting revolts. And it's something that the Dark Elves basically have to do on the higher difficulties, which is why I said that this is a campaign that on certain difficulties you're going to get a very different experience. So I cannot really recommend this campaign on higher difficulties if you're looking to have fun, because if you're sitting there thinking, oh yeah, but I'm looking for a challenge, and if that's the case, play Warhammer 2. Like, it is more difficult to play every single faction in Warhammer 2 than it is in Warhammer 3, because the AI puts up way more of a fight, fields way more armies, they're more difficult to defeat on the battlefield, because they're smarter and they get more cheats. So if you're looking for a challenge, just play them in Warhammer 2, right? It's actually tougher. But if you're looking for extra busy work that's really unrewarding, then there you go. You play them on legendary difficulty in Warhammer 3. You've also got these dictats over here, but here's the problem, right? This one here can be active at all times in each one of your provinces, costing you a lot of slaves, which is one way to get your resource down, therefore public order penalties down. But this one over here, this one can only be activated in one province at a time. So typically speaking, most factions start to conquer faster the later the campaign is, but the Dark Elves not so much, because of their limitations with dictats. So while the dictats is definitely something that is good, it came with such a bad system that it was basically required as a band-aid for dealing with it. So yeah, overall, Dark Elves are a mixed can, where some people are going to enjoy them and some people just aren't. It's something that is a big problem for the Dark Elves, and one of the reasons why I think they're an extremely unpopular race. Now, that doesn't mean that nobody likes the Dark Elves, but what that means is that not as many people like Dark Elves as perhaps like High Elves, or perhaps like Skaven, or perhaps like the Empire, or perhaps like any other race in this entire game. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say the Dark Elves are possibly the most unpopular race in Warhammer 3. Of course, I'd actually need to have a look at the actual statistics behind that, but I have a sneaking suspicion, based on your guys' feedback, that you guys don't like the Dark Elves. Because I tell you what, I don't like the Dark Elves. They suck in Warhammer 3. Not in terms of being weak. They're not weak. They're very strong, actually. And that's what makes it so annoying. There's a strong race with really boring mechanics. That's not a good combination. So I honestly can't recommend playing as Morathi in Warhammer 3. I can recommend playing her in Warhammer 2. So if you want to play Morathi, crank up Warhammer 2, because she's a base game Warhammer 2 lord, and play her there. Her campaign in Warhammer 2 is very challenging, for sure, but it is a lot more fun than this garbage in Warhammer 3, in my opinion. I'm not saying Warhammer 3 is garbage, I'm saying the Dark Elves are garbage in Warhammer 3. Anyway, that's the end of this one here, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think, whether you agree or disagree. Obviously, this can get quite a heated topic. Appreciate you guys. Let me know which Legendary Lord you want me to cover next. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Later, guys.